I wonder how much of what I'm about to tell you, you know already. You might well know all of it. I've found some of it today. Some of it I already knew. I possibly hadn't knitted it all together in the way that I am going to try to do now. And it, once again, somewhat oddly, I was not expecting this to happen when I got up on Monday, but it knits together the two big stories of the week: the Southport murderer pleading guilty in court, and the inauguration of Donald Trump as the new president of the United States of America. And I still don't really understand quite how those planets have aligned, but align they have. Yesterday, it was because Keir Starmer delivered a speech absolutely stressing his understanding of and commitment to the rule of law, while Donald Trump is in the business of undermining and denying the rule of law. And in a sense, he has to. When he releases the January the 6th criminals, when he pardons them, he's not really pardoning them, as Emily Maitlis explains in an excellent article in the Eye today. He's pardoning himself. He's vindicating himself. They can't stay in jail if he wants to continue lying. So he has to release them. It's a sort of fascinating psychological circle, but it involves, of course, undermining the rule of law. And in fact, some of the legal and police professionals responsible for jailing the man who ran something called the Silk Road, a dark online marketplace where you could buy drugs and launder money and get up to all sorts of no good, he's pardoned him as well and described the people that pursued him legally as scum, calling the forces of law and order scum. Fascist playbook, let's just tick that box as well. And that's relevant to the conversation I want to have first today, because this chap, who you may not even have heard of, Ross Ulbricht, jailed for life, more than at least $200 million worth of drugs sold anonymously on the platform that he had set up, an online illegal drug marketplace. Sentenced to life, that's been commuted. Trump phoned his mother personally to tell him he was going to be released. So that's the attitude he takes to people who run and own illegal platforms where you and your children can buy drugs and launder money. I don't know what the score was with regards to getting hold of weapons, but it was on Amazon that the Southport killer bought his knife. Amazon, of course, is owned by Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos was sitting in the row behind Donald Trump at the latter's inauguration, sitting in front of the cabinet. That's not an accident. That's choreography. That's absolutely deliberate to point out that the billionaires, the people whose qualifications for the role are their bank balance and their sycophancy, the bank balance and their sycophancy. It was what gets them into that row. You could have a huge bank balance, but you're not going to be there if you're not sycophantic. You could be massively sycophantic, but you're not going to get there if you haven't got a huge bank balance. Guess which British politician who routinely claims to have the ear of Donald Trump and to have a special inside track and to possess the ability to act as a special envoy between London and Washington didn't even get into the room where it happens, much to his own humiliation. I'll leave that one hanging for a while. So it's corporatism. And on the subject of corporatism, when we were talking about Elon Musk's Nazi salutes yesterday and this hilarious attempt to pretend or to claim that it wasn't really a Nazi salute, it was a Roman salute, we mentioned Benito Mussolini. I'll mention him again today because he said fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism because it is a merger of state and corporate power. Anthony Scaramucci, who of course was very briefly in Trump's last administration, points out that there was symbolism to the family being in the front row at the inauguration, the billionaires in the second row, and cabinet in the third row. There's messages there, he said, to corporate America and the global society, take a bended knee to me. So, the man who owns the platform where the Southport killer bought his knife was sitting in that row behind Donald Trump's family. The man who owns the platform that still hosts and holds the footage that the Southport killer looked before he set off to that Taylor Swift dance class. He was not just sitting in the row directly behind Donald Trump. He is the guy that got on stage and did the Nazi salutes. Elon Musk has so far failed to remove a violent terrorist video from his platform, which was watched by Axel Rudakubana in the hour before he made his way to that Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport in July of last year. It was filmed in Sydney, and it shows the Assyrian bishop, Mari Emmanuel, being attacked as he speaks at the altar by a 16-year-old later charged with committing a terrorist act. He is, and this is pretty grisly if you want to turn me down briefly, he was stabbed in his face and his eye by the attacker, has lost his right eye as a consequence, and Rudakubana watched it less than an hour before he, armed with a knife bought from the platform owned by a billionaire sitting behind Donald Trump's family at the inauguration, watched it on a platform owned by a billionaire sitting behind Donald Trump's family at the inauguration, and then made his way to the dance class in Southport. And I mean, some of the stuff, you'll be aware of the Al-Qaeda manual and the rein that he was able to access online, but the full details of what he had in his home, in his bedroom, are staggering for two reasons. Number one, the sheer breadth of his enthusiasm for violence, the sheer breadth of his violence is extraordinary, incredibly democratic, everything from the IRA right through to Fidel Castro. You've got just a reverence for genocide, a fascination with terrorism, violence, murder. And, of course, that's why it has proved impossible to pin any ideology on him. But where do you think he found all that? Where does one go to find the sort of material that the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, yesterday described as deeply dangerous? The prosecution will provide at the sentencing on Thursday more detail about the material that he searched for online. But I can tell the House, Yvette Cooper said, the government is this week contacting technology companies to ask them to remove dangerous material that he accessed. So you'd use Google, right, in the first instance, and it would take you to YouTube. And guess who owns those platforms? Men who were sitting in the row behind Donald Trump's family and in front of the actual cabinet at the inauguration. So I am not given to hyperbole, but the aligning of these planets is at the very least notable, right? You might dismiss this out of hand. You might think Yvette Cooper is stupid to think that the men who own these platforms should take down the sort of material that could be responsible for either radicalizing or provoking. I think of the Brianna Jai case as well, where some of the stuff that those killers had been looking at would I mean, I don't know what figure of speech to use. I think I'm just going to say it would make a normal person puke. Right? It would actually make you get that watering in your mouth, your tummy goes fat, and you just want to look away. And yet it is relatively easy to find. I can also tell you that I kind of think I told you this at the time, but I wasn't 100% sure of my facts. The terrorist handbook owned by the attacker was listed on the websites of major booksellers. I can't remember whether I told you this or not. If I didn't, it was because I thought it can't be true, despite the fact that a colleague had told me that it was. So you've got online texts, including military studies in the jihad against tyrants, the Al-Qaeda training manual, which Waterstones had for sale as a hardback and a paperback on its website. So again, the claims of cover-up and misinformation because he had something that was for sale on the Waterstones website look ridiculous. But it's this... It's this, well, the state corporatism, this alliance of the men who own these platforms, where we're just using Rudakubana as one example, where he watched a terrorist attack a human being with a knife shortly before he marched into that dance class and attacked human beings with a knife, who own the platform where he bought the knife, who own the search engines that he would use to find the material that he collected, who own the platforms where you can watch the video. So Twitter has it on their website, that's Elon Musk's, but YouTube, I haven't double-checked whether YouTube has it there or not, actually. So scratch that for the time being. But where you buy the knife, where you watch the videos, where you can search for stuff that is technically illegal, and the men responsible, and there's two elements to this. So the first bit is this. The men responsible for owning all of the platforms are all now bending the knee for Donald Trump. The second bit is that they've all changed their tune. So Sergey Brin, who owns Google, was very much opposed to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's own vice president questioned whether or not he'd turn out to be the American Hitler not long ago, but that ship has sailed. Mark Zuckerberg banned him from Facebook, was absolutely adamant that there was no room on his platforms for this kind of rhetoric and violence and lies, democracy-damaging demagoguery that we saw on January the 6th. Even Elon Musk was at one point a Joe Biden supporter. So they've all thrown their lot in with Donald Trump through fear and self-interest and a dedication to further self-enrichment. But what the hell can a British government do to rein them in? Because that is the fight that they've picked. Yvette Cooper yesterday accused the tech firms of profiting from hosting content that put children's lives at risk and urged them to act before new online laws took effect this year. I told you yesterday that the relationship between Elon Musk's sudden interest in British politics and the arrival of new online safety laws is almost certainly not a coincidence. But to see them all lined up together yesterday, all of the men who between them could, by tea time today, limit the sale of knives, limit access to radicalizing material, remove footage of crimes being committed that was watched in the hour before he went to the dance class in Southport by the murderer who pleaded guilty this week. All of these, they could do it. I think they could do it by tea time today. I remember before Elon Musk bought Twitter, things would disappear incredibly quickly. You know, even use of the C word, if you reported it, it would see the post, if not the account holder, taken down. It was an imperfect system, but it was at least a vaguely civilized one. And some of the people that were removed from the platform were removed for disseminating far-right lies. And Musk, of course, brought them all back. All of them. So I don't know who is qualified to answer the question that I am about to ask you. And again, I don't know how many of the things I've just shared with you already knew. The pardoning, perhaps, of the Silk Road founder, the man whose website hosted illegal drug trades, pardoned by a man who is motivated by opposition to illegal drug trades when they are undertaken by foreign cartels. I don't understand the logic of that. It's got something to do with libertarianism. But the rest of it, the fact that the people who own these sites, these platforms, could do what the British government wants, even as Donald Trump seems to be preparing to do whatever it is that they want. Facebook has some hideous content on it, Mark Zuckerberg's platform, and that really now, in the absence of fact checkers, can only get worse. So 17 minutes after 10 is the time. Here's my question for you. How feasible is it? Technologically, how feasible is it to actually get the genie back in the bottle? Whether you want to talk about it being possible to buy knives on Amazon, which may have come as a surprise to some people with no apparent age checking or verification, something that the government is seeking to address, or indeed to, I know you can't get rid of all of it. I know if you take it down from there, it will pop up again there. But these platforms, these household name platforms that have made their way into pretty much every home in the country, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the YouTubes, get it off there. Make it harder to find the radicalizing material, the film of terrorist attacks actually being undertaken. And surely the overall situation would improve. That's what I think. I could be wrong. And as ever, give me a ring and tell me why. 0345 6060973. Because it's a bit of a shocker, right? That those men are all lining up in the row behind Trump. And yet on this side of the Atlantic, we are increasingly concerned about the material, whether it is a physical item like a knife or an ethereal item like a film. We're increasingly concerned about the ease of access to the things that they make their money from. Can the tech companies be reined in? 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. I think, history has taught us, particularly when you look at gambling sites, they can do a heck of a lot more to limit access. But I can't believe that the film of a stabbing watched by this criminal in the hour before he undertook a murderous stabbing, I can't believe that is so easily accessible. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I'm stupid. But here it is. 90 minutes after 10 is the time. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Can the British government, or indeed any government, particularly in the absence of American support, do anything to limit access to the sort of material, the images of horrific violence, if the tech firms don't want to do it? Is there anything the British government can do? Here's the real point, okay? Online harms. How can we protect our children from online harms, including violence, if the platforms don't want to be regulated? Is there anything we can do? 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. I just don't know. Yvette Cooper thinks it's possible. Keir Starmer thinks it's possible. Is it possible in a world where Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Sergey Brin and Larry Page are on the right side, where they want to help? They want to make it harder for your children to watch hideous violence online? Maybe. But if they don't, what chance has our government got of making things better for our children? Hit the numbers now, you will get through, okay? I don't know much about this world, but I do naively believe that it must be possible to do more. The thing I don't know is whether you can do more when the people who are capable of delivering what you desire are lining up behind a man whose respect for the rule of law is absolutely non-existent, and who has described the people who locked up the man who ran a platform that was literally an illegal drug marketplace. He's described the law and order professionals who locked him up as scum.